All right, so I'm on the first half of replacing the rear brakes. That would be the rotor and pads on the 2007 Hyundai. And just taking a picture of this, these shoes, these are the emergency brake or parking brake shoes. And yeah, they're worn, but they're good. They're good enough. You only use these to park. You're not supposed to use them to stop with. So if you use them to stop with, they wear out really quick. But these pads, that one has a little life in it. That one has a little bit more life in it, but they definitely need to be replaced. Rotor's rough. I'm replacing it. So my wife was complaining about grinding from the front, but I had replaced those brakes, so I'm replacing these, hoping that's what it is. So I'll extend the video for the other side showing how I removed it using the hammer because they're hard to get off. But if you have a technique, it kind of helps. All right, so these are going to be slotted and drilled rotors, and I bought them from Auto Shack, and that's the brand or the company that I bought the front brakes from. That they are also slotted and drilled, and they're pretty good. Now, I didn't know that these had a right and a left side. See, those part numbers have an L there. That's left and right. So I didn't know that about the rotors. I'll have to examine those and see what the difference is. But Auto Shack has good prices. I got the pads and the rotors for both of them for like less than $90, including tax, and the shipping's free from them guys. So there's the slotted and drilled rotors that I'll be installing. Looks pretty nice. So yeah, I remember now. The reason there's a right and a left is because of the direction of the slots, and also I guess the drill holes. You can put them on backwards, but they're really designed to go on this way. Probably helps with the wear of the pads or something, not sure. But slotted and drilled brakes supposed to help improve braking and also keep the rotor cooler. So one thing to point out, actually a couple things to point out, when you install the rotor, make sure that you line up the holes, because there's two screws that have to align with these two holes. You'll see they're threaded and the screws are here. So before I install them, I'm going to put anti-seize grease on them, but they go in that hole. And they're just snugged really well. You don't have to torque them to any value, I don't think. Just snug them really well. Also, another thing you ought to do is there's a hole here that you can use to assist you to get these off when they're really stuck. I didn't have to do it this time. It came off with relative ease. But you have to remember to take the plug out of the old one. See that rubber plug right there? We got to take it out and install it. That's it. So I've got the rotor mounted already. Two screws are in. Use something like this to snug them up pretty good. Just a wrench with a large flat head fitting on the end like that, and just torque it down hand tight, pretty tight. I like to put anti-seize grease on the surfaces where the pads mount to the caliper bracket. It just makes them easier to install, and also they'll move easier and might make a little less noise. Put the new pads in the caliper bracket before you install it onto the car. One thing to mention is if you do put grease on the surfaces like I did, do not get it on the pad surfaces. Be very careful about that. You'll ruin them. These are ceramic pads. Last a good long time. Also, the pad with the squealer goes on the inside, towards the inside of the car and towards the back. So this is going to be mounted like this, and this is on the right side. So the back of the car is this way, and the inside of the car is that way. So the squealer goes there. All right, so I've got the caliper bracket on there. Looked it up online. It says 65 foot-pounds. That seems a bit much because these are only 14 millimeter bolts. I'll double check that in the manual, but I went as close to 65 as I could. I think it's good enough. That caliper bolts, those are going to be torqued. These small 14 millimeter bolts are going to be torqued to 35. So 65, if it's correct, 65 for the caliper bracket, 35 for the caliper bolts. One thing I forgot to mention, when you put this on, have the brake pads away, spread out, you know, as far as you can before you mount this. And then when you get it mounted, push them in with your hands. Then the caliper you'll need to compress with a special tool. You can use a C-clamp, that works, but you got to compress that that piston in to accommodate the new fatter brake pads. Before I actually continue from here, you'll need to remove this little plastic plug here. This cap should just pop off. It's being a booger. There it goes. So pop that open if it has one. Usually this is a 10 millimeter. It can be 8 millimeter. You'll loosen that, find a bucket before you start compressing. Let the fluid come out of here. You don't want to push the fluid back in through the hose on a modern day car with analog brakes or whatever. You could damage something. So just open this up and compress it and close it. You may have to bleed. If you're careful, you won't have to. So here's the kind of toolkit you need to push that piston in, caliper piston. Basically, it's just a screw mechanism that compresses down as you turn it. Wish I had extra hands, but basically this piece gets installed on that piece through the handle like that, and then you've got to select an appropriate size circle piece that will fit on the caliper without damaging anything, so that when you twist it, it presses it down. So here's that tool installed in the caliper. The piece that I was saying you had to put onto the twisty piece is here, and the circle piece that I selected is here. As I turn this clockwise, it's going to compress it, and the fluid's going to drain out, and you can see it's already starting to drip because I've loosened it, but it's going to squirt out of there, and I'm going to catch it into here until the piston's completely pressed in, and then I'll be able to install it onto the wheel, or onto the rotor. What the hell? The rear rotor brake assembly, whatever. So there you see it's completely compressed in now. So I will be able to easily install it there. So that's what I'll do next. There by being there. Okay, I'm on the driver's side now. I've already removed the 2 screws using the slotted socket, if you will, slotted screwdriver socket thingy with the socket wrench. Next I'll remove the caliper, and I'll hang it on this. This is real convenient for hanging it. That way it doesn't keep any weight on the hose. Then I'll remove the bracket. Both these bolts, both the caliper bolts and the caliper bracket bolts are 14 millimeter. So that's nice. Only have to have one size. Usually it's 14 and 19. And but on this one it's the same. You still torque the bracket bolts higher than the caliper bolts. So once I get this removed, then this will be stuck on. You have to have the brake off in order to remove this. So the emergency brake is off, which makes it kind of dangerous, so you got to be careful. So emergency brake off, and then I will get a hammer and I will tap around like this to get it off, breaking it loose, and then hopefully it'll come off as easy as the other side did. The other side gave me a little trouble, but not too bad. Okay, so I've got the caliper bolts off. So the caliper bolt is just going to lift right off now. It comes straight off. Unless your brakes are in really bad shape, and then it'll stick, and you'll have to figure out a way to get it off of there with a little force. But still, it should come off without too much effort. So now I'm just going to hang this over the edge of this thing, this bracket, or suspension piece, whatever. There we go. Well, let me get it away from there. All right. So now 2 more bolts to be removed to remove this bracket, and the shoes will come with it if I don't remove them first. These can come off before. As you can see, I've got the caliper bracket off. Here it is. The shoes came along with it, which is nice, and that's the way it did on the other side as well. The rotor is stuck on there just like the other one. It's not coming off easy. If they're new brakes, they'll come off easy. But these are not new. These have been used a while and they're kind of rusted on. So what I'll do is I'll take a sledgehammer or mini sledge like this, and I'll go around and I'll tap as I pull on here. With one hand I'll pull, with my left hand I'll pull up here and pull the rotor toward me, and with the other I'll tap it. And I'll rotate the rotor all the way around doing that, tapping, and pulling. And as long as those inside shoes haven't made a groove, the parking brake shoes haven't made a groove in this, it will come off. Otherwise, you're going to have to get a little forceful, and you can damage the shoes, and you may have to replace them. But in my case, it wasn't grooved badly enough to merit that. So that's the method I use. Let's see if it works again. It looks like someone has been in here before, because the rubber cap is missing on this guy. On the other one, as you recall, there was a cap filling that hole. Alright, well, this side isn't cooperating as well as the other one. I've been banging on it quite a bit. Haven't made any progress that I can tell. So I took some liquid penetrating oil, spray penetrating oil, and sprayed around this hub, because that's where it's going to be sticking. If it was the brakes, the brake shoes catching on the inside of the rotor, then we wouldn't be able to turn it like this, right? They'd be engaging the rotor. So it's just rusted here. I'm going to let this penetrating oil set for a few seconds, and I'll continue with the method. Basically, pull here and hammer like hell on this, and that vibration hopefully will break it loose. Hub's off. Parking brakes look fine, look usable to me. Not perfect. Car's nearly 20 years old, so can't complain. Everything looks real good, so I'm just going to be putting this one back together just like the other side. I can't think of anything else to say at this point. Actually, I can't think of one other thing. The caliper needs to be compressed. It's better to go ahead and compress it before you put the new rotor on. That way, if you make a mistake and squirt on it, you're not going to have to make it, clean up the oil. You don't want to get oil on the pads. You can get it on the rotor as long as you clean it off real well with a solvent. So this time, I'm going to compress this piston before I install the new parts. Alright, so as I'm installing these brakes back on this rotor, it occurs to me that this is really not supposed to be used to help remove it. I said that earlier. It's probably more of an inspection thing where you can see in there with a flashlight and look at the springs and stuff, and maybe even use it for an adjustment port. I don't really think that is for removing. I'm going to retract that previous statement. So if you know what it is, put a comment, but I'm suspecting it's for examining and maybe for adjusting things if there's any kind of adjustments in there. I don't believe there are any adjustments, so maybe just a visual inspection port. So I got a chance to look up the actual torque values in the manual, and the bracket values can be from 58 to 72, so 65 is fine for that. But the caliper bolts, those are between like 18 and 23. So I'm gonna redo the other side and torque them to 20 foot-pounds. So the value that I saw online was wrong. You have to be careful about that. I don't think it hurt anything, so I'm just gonna retorque them to 20. This side I'm gonna torque to 20 as well. So car's back together. Just wanted to look at these old parts from the driver's side rear. These pads were glazed, but the other pads were even more glazed and more worn. These are worn pretty good. This rotor is in better shape than the other side. It does have some pitting and stuff that could be making some scraping noises. She was complaining about scraping. We will find out soon enough. So got everything back together and torqued to the manual spec torques. And I do want to bleed this though. I looked at the reservoir, and it was low. So I'm going to want to top this off and bleed it to the rear. So it's pretty low. Top that off and bleed it. I'll have to get my son to help me do that. It's a two-person operation for me. I don't use a self-bleeding tool. But anyway, that's it in a nutshell. I do things that other people don't do, and they probably wouldn't recommend putting the anti-seize grease on the rails for the pads. Maybe don't do that if you're concerned about that. This is just the way that I do it, and I'm not a mechanic. I'm an electrical engineer, so not mechanically inclined necessarily. But that's what I did on this job, and we'll see if my wife crashes because of it. I'm sure she won't, because I've done this many times. That's it for now. There may be more. I'm not sure.